We wanted to get to a very
This is a good
interesting
story.
interview
You found this. This is great.
with Barack Obama. So President Obama sits for an interview with Jewish Insider, sort of. It was one of these deals, which I always think is kind of bullshit, where they email the questions.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and
email
then you
interviews
respond.
are fake. Just so
Totally
everyone
fake,
knows.
because obviously someone else can draft your responses. You have time to think about it and parse and come up with the most pablum whatever in response. But look, if the former president wanted to give me an email interview, would I accept it?
Yeah,
probably. Okay, it's better than nothing. So he does this bullshit email interview with the Jewish Insider, and we could throw this tear sheet up on the screen. He doesn't answer a single question about Israel or Iran. So basically, the two biggest, most significant issues in the Middle East right now, and the interview's largely focused on Middle East and foreign policy and some on him and his relationship with the Jewish community, he just completely does not respond whatsoever. And so here's what they say. They pointed this out in the interview too. They say, how in a recent interview with Jewish Insider, his first with a Jewish publication since leaving office in 2017, Obama shied away from discussing tensions with that community in more detail. The former president avoided every question touching on Israel and the Middle East that we posed to him. Of the 13 questions sent to the former president listed below in full, he provided answers to just 5, focusing on the history of Black-Jewish relations, the Capitol siege, the state of American politics, and the rise of anti-Semitism, among other topics. Here's a few of the questions that he did not answer. They asked him, in your view, what did the pro-Israel community, and they name check AIPAC in particular, get right, and what did it get wrong during your time in office? No response. They also asked him on Middle East issues, did you feel less inhibited in your second term? Does that partially explain the U.S. decision in 2016 to abstain on UN Security Council Resolution 2334 condemning Israeli settlement construction? Important question. No answer. There was a question about, hey, what's going on with Arab countries, including the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, normalizing ties with Israel? What do you think is behind that? No answer there. And also, do you feel as if there's any hope for Iran's pro-democracy demonstrators? No answer there either.
I remember 2009 well, actually.
There are a number of other questions about JCPOA. Zero response on what were really the most substantive questions here. And again, in an interview with a Jewish publication, after what we all just witnessed, the happening in Israel and Gaza, the only time he even says the word Israel is he's talking about something that happened as the Israeli embassy.
Right.
That's it, a speech that he gave. That's the whole thing. I mean, what incredible cowardice.
Look, this is who he is. And this is, Matt Stoller coined this around Obama, and I believe this. He's the Instagram president, which is that the moment he leaves office, he decides he needs to create him and Michelle, not just his former presidents, into lifestyle brands. Becoming literally had stadium tours, okay? That was one of the best-selling books in the whole country. I don't begrudge the Obamas for their success.
I do.
But what it is that they created themselves into pop culture figure icons. The Netflix series, having their own production houses, $60 million book contract. All of that is created in an image where they can't actually be offensive. They've made it the ultimate jump, where if you want to make real money in this country, never talk about politics. You need to go and become some anodyne culture figure,
Kelly Clarkson or something like that.
Again, that's fine. It's all good. Like Taylor Swift. Like, these people are post-political in that everybody across the aisle likes them. Obama found out the hard way, it's actually bad for business to be political. So what did they do? Well, he goes and starts hanging out with Richard Branson. That's his very first vacation, is with a bunch of billionaires and celebrities on a private island in the Virgin Islands. Once again, look, like, congrats, man. You really did make it. Like, Obama's life story is actually inspirational. I've been to the part of Hawaii where he grew up. But the real fascinating thing to me is that the more he has to protect now, his hundreds of millions of dollars in interests, the more we reveal himself for who he really is. He's not going to touch anything controversial in this. And I actually recently saw this. Obama is imploring the Obama Foundation, the business community in Chicago, in order to speak up against environmental activists in order to build his new presidential library.
Oh my God.
It literally saying, Obama implores corporate leaders and business community to head against environmental activists who have concerns about the Obama Foundation and the new Obama Presidential Library. Can you think of anything more
I mean, that's
perfect?
That's like the story of his entire
That
presidency.
is the story of his whole presidency.
Was like punching left and, demonstrating his moderate conservative bona fides and avoiding taking stands on anything controversial as much as he possibly could. And, what really makes me mad about this is that former President Obama really does occupy a very unique place in American history by dint of his trailblazing status and the trust and rapport that he has with a very broad swath of the American public at this point that actually goes beyond just the hardcore Democratic base. He is in a position to be an incredible moral leader at a moment in time that is desperately crying out for people to be courageous moral leaders. Of course he's abandoned.
2009, I think
it's completely obvious here. You can't say a word about Israel during this time when we just saw the massive what happened in that country and just like the outrageous policies and institutionalized apartheid. You can't say one thing
it's bad for business
about Palestinian lives. Nothing. I mean, to me, it's an unconscionable level of complete cowardice. You're already a wealthy man. You're already extraordinarily popular. You're already extraordinarily powerful. What are you protecting exactly? That to me is just what's so sad here. I do want to give him credit on one answer, though, that I thought was a little bit courageous given the present moment. It shouldn't be, but it is a little bit courageous given the present moment and actually, again, fits with the other things we were talking about, the free speech concerns that we've been talking about in this show. He gets asked about safeguarding the First Amendment. And they say, look, the right for its part supports bakers who refuse to make wedding cakes for gay couples, but then they draw the line at boycotts of Israel. The left sees things the other way around. Where do you land on this dynamic? What role, if any, should the state play in keeping the marketplace free of bigotry? And how can it do so while safeguarding First Amendment rights? Typical Obama, he's got a long wind up about, I see their concern. I'm a constitutional law professor is the first thing he says. We got it, dude. We know.
We all know.
Okay.
Everyone knows.
But he comes down in the right place. He says there are obviously limits to free speech, including when it directly threatens someone else. And I think the state has a role to play in keeping people safe. But beyond that, I believe the purpose of free speech is to make sure that we are forced to use argument and reason and words in making our democracy work. You don't have to be fearful of somebody spouting bad ideas. Just don't argue them. Make the case as to why they're wrong. Win over adherence. That's how things work in a democracy. So I do want to give him a little bit credit for what I thought was a strong answer there.
Sure. It's like, great. Thank you, President Obama.
Better than nothing.
It's like, this was one of the
Would it have surprised you, though, if he took the opposite view?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and I bet you that Michelle and all the other people around him were pressuring him otherwise. This is the thing. He was one of the greatest politicians of the age. People get mad when I say that. Sorry. He's one of the best public speakers ever on record in modern American politics. Came in 2008, could have been probably one of the biggest turning points in modern American history if he had taken his presidency in another way, actually ended the wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, fulfilled that mission. Remember how many people came out and voted for Obama. It was crazy. Like, he won this huge majority. White working class voters, everybody came in for Obama. It was one of those things where within, a year, it was over. And it led to his own presidential downfall in terms of the Tea Party backlash and more. And it was because of this, I don't know what else to call it. I don't know what to say. Like, it's just there's a huge level of cowardice whenever it comes to his inability in order to engage. And what he's decided his legacy will be is identitarian, which is that the first line, Peter Baker wrote this, the first line of his obituary was written the day of his election, first black president. It could have been much longer, right? It could have been 5 more sentences around changing the country, ending the war, and all that. He decided to stick with that and turn himself into a lifestyle brand. It's actually more of a tragedy than it is anything else.
He's bought into basically the brand of the totally content-free version of identity politics that's like Jamie Dimon kneeling in support of Black Lives Matter in front of a bank vault.
That's a great,
That's
or in the Pelosi's Kente.
Kente cloth. That's what he's just because look, it's something that his billionaire buddies are comfortable with. It doesn't challenge them whatsoever. Doesn't challenge, him and his family and their position whatsoever. So that's what he's leaned into. Your point is really important, I think, about how when he was elected And it wasn't just that he was elected. Democrats win in a landslide,
Yes.
right? They come sweep into office. They have
Super majority in Congress.
super majority in the
It was crazy.
Senate. I mean, you can't even wrap your head around that at this point. Large majority in the House, right? All the levers of power. And you're at this moment of total crisis and collapse. And what I talked about yesterday in my monologue was this new research about 21 different Western democracies from Thomas Piketty and how they've failed to address inequality, even as, like, where is the class consciousness? Where is the class war as inequality mounts and mounts and mounts? He points to 2 exceptions to that failure to combat inequality and the fact that elites are increasingly consolidating, education elites in particular, in left of center parties. And that's Ireland and Portugal.
Right.
And what was the main factor that led to those countries diverging and maintaining a class-oriented politics? It was the fact that they had, in the wake of the financial crisis, left parties that seized the mantle of class politics and offered policies that were going to help everyone in the population, the broad working class. Now, look, America's very unique. It's very distinct from every other country on the planet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that was the moment right there in the crash and immediately thereafter to chart a different course for this country, to change things, to use the crisis in the way that Rahm Emanuel in a very sort of like,
go to waste. He's
you know, it's an uncomfortable thing to say, but yeah, never let a good crisis go to waste. They had the moment right then to remake the direction that America was going, to offer people something that actually made sense, that gave them hope for the future, that gave them a substantive vision they could buy into, instead of the like reactionary culture war bullshit hell that we're living through now. And he didn't do it.
No,
I mean,
it's
there's
his
just,
fault.
and look, he's not like the worst president in history or anything like that, but it was such a critical moment.
Yeah.
And he's such an intelligent person that he had the ability to see the turning point. He had the ability to see where things needed to go and completely failed and continues to just be a profile in moral cowardice.
Yeah, I think he was too smart for his own good, and
That's probably
a lot
I
of the
think
reason.
there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, you actually would much prefer like some union wheel and dealing politician at the time, because at least you could just very clearly cut. The book behind me, Freedom from Fear, one of my favorite books, is exactly about a purely non-ideological man. His name was Franklin D. Roosevelt. Most people remember him as the No, he didn't believe in any of that. And that's fine. He just recognized this is what needs to be done in order to save this country. He said, or one of his advisors said at the time, he'll be the last president of the United States if he fails. I still believe that to be true.